The history of Celestia is a puzzle continuously revealed throughout the tale of Teyvat, and the more we peer through the lens of their more questionable history, Celestia's past is ridden with conquest. And today, I want to propose the statement that the gods are seeping the power of the original inhabitants of Teyvat, effectively stealing the power of the world that isn't theirs. Now, as my usual disclaimer, these are all just speculations and theories and are not indicative of the final product. Additionally, the word steal was considered for the context of Celestia's past, which I'll get to further along the video. Also, I won't be going over the intricacies of Celestia's hierarchy or whatnot, but I have gone through those in another video, so you can click the links down below to see what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, let's begin. Before we begin about the theory of Celestia harnessing the power of the old world, we need to establish what the old world even is. The furthest we know from Celestia is the Book of the Sun and Moon, released alongside Enkanomiya. This was a book that closely details the history of Celestia before the Archon War, and connects to even more tales in Genshin Impact, such as the Three Moon Sisters and the strange hesitance of the Archons to speak about the island in the sky. According to the Pyro Bisector, known as Enjo, this book was among the reasons Orobashi was silenced, but the validity of that statement is unclear. It's unknown how much learning about Celestia's past can get you in trouble, but at the very least, we know the contents of the book. These chronicles are known to the people here as the times before Sun and Moon. Back then, no gods walked the earth, and the whole land belonged to a single civilization. Yes, that's precisely it. That's why I wanted to find this book. That way we, the Abyss Order, would have proof. Proof that the gods in Celestia came from beyond this world. The planet where Teyvat stands on was currently under the dominion of dragon lords known as the Seven Sovereigns. These are elemental dragons and creatures of what is known as the Light Realm, or better known as the Elemental Realm. The Light Realm is where creatures that harness the pure, raw, primordial elements, and most likely where most creatures we see in the game that aren't humanoid, come from. The inhabitants of this realm are the Bishops. But Celestia was originally not from this world. The eternal throne of the heavens came and the world was made anew. The true Lord, the primordial one named Phanes, came forth and did battle against the seven terrifying sovereigns. After this fierce battle, the primordial one created shades of itself. The number of these shades was 4. The only confirmed shade we know of is the god of time, Istaroth. But with these shades, the world's rivers and mountains were made, the seas, oceans, grasses, and trees, and finally, humanity. So, let's dissect such a creation. The concept of Genshin's archons and visions is tied closely with the real-life theological concept of Gnosticism. From the usage of terms like Old World or Gnosis or Ascension, the resemblance is almost uncanny. The New Bible Dictionary outlines the Gnostic beliefs as the following. Matter was the creation of an inferior being, the Demiurge. He, along with his aides, the archons, kept mankind imprisoned within their material existence, and barred the path of individual souls trying to ascend to the spirit world after death. Not even this possibility was open to everyone, however, for only those who possessed a divine spark could hope to escape from their corporeal existence. And even those possessing such a spark did not have an automatic escape, for they needed to reach the enlightenment of a gnosis before they could become aware of their own spiritual condition. The fact that Celestia came to this world and effectively destroyed the previous inhabitants is already a questionable act on their end. Their motivations are unknown, but at the same time, we know that the old world was effectively burnt away, its previous rulers gone, and its inhabitants repurposed. But I have 3 core assumptions about Celestia, essentially taking pre-existing resources and repurposing it for their own uses. So let's break them down one by one. The demon gods of Celestia harness their powers from the elemental realm and are not originally creatures capable of manipulating elemental power. The archons are instead born from this mass-produced energy as life forms. By extension, the demon gods are not part of the gods that first invaded Teyvat, but are instead born from this world. The hierarchy of the gods is currently unknown, but we can establish something based off on what we know. First is the primordial one, then the shades, And then the demon gods of Celestia who fought to become archons. The archons are just ascended demon gods that won the war. But now comes the question. Where did the demon gods come from? Gods like Barbados, Baal, Morax, and the like. Well, it's possible that the gods are as much creations of Celestia as humans are. First is that Phanes was the first one that arrived to this world and created other creatures like Istaroth. As far as we know, Phanes was alone, given the source material saying they split themselves apart after the battle with the seven sovereigns. And after that, it's possible that the gods were created by the Shades alongside their creation of humanity. According to Venti's lore, Venti, before taking the form of the nameless bard, was but a thread of the Thousand Winds. The title Thousand Winds is also a moniker used by the god of time, Istaroth, according to the Byakuya-koku collection. We also know that celestial magic is different from elemental magic, and that the elemental powers of the archons are inherent to themselves. There are also elemental creatures here outside of celestial territory, and a whole realm of primordial elemental energy. It's actually even possible that the light realm is the purest form of the elements, which is reflected in the description of the name card of the achievement, Colors of the Rainbow. Light can refract into countless colors, but people stop at 7 because they're too lazy to count. Perhaps the elements are like that too. This might be why the light realm and the elemental realm are one and the same, but that also begs the question that the light realm has pre-existed the archons and even the shades, which make the correlation a lot more questionable. It's possible that the archons just weaved from the energy of the elemental realm and became somewhat carbon copies of the elemental creatures we see, and that it's not the hypostasis or the specters that are similar to Venti, for example, but that it's Venti similar to them because Animo's fundamentals have already been long established before Venti's creation. Zhongli and Venti are known elemental spirits, and the three archons have displayed great power before and after their time with the Gnosis. It's a common misconception that without the Gnosis, the archons are weak, when the extent of their power with and without the Gnosis is currently unknown to us. Venti, Zhongli, and A have been able to use both their archon-like abilities and their elemental abilities without hindrance, so the idea that the Gnosis impacts their power significantly is still questionable.
As you know, visions are external magical foci that only a small minority of people possess. They use these visions to channel elemental power. Instead, each archon has an internal magical focus that resonates directly with Celestia itself, known as a gnosis.
What I like at this dialogue is that Venti specifically uses the word foci. Usually in fantasy, a foci is a medium that allows for an external energy to be converted into something the wielder uses. Think of it like a staff or a wand, but the external energy remains to be the key source. In this case, elemental energy. It's channeling, not creating, which further hints that the archons aren't the apex of elemental magic and are just as primitive as the vision wielders. I just found that interesting. The next theory following through this, though, is about the purpose of creating the devil gods and establishing a new order in the world, almost similar to the seven sovereigns. It's possible that the archons are Phanes and the Shades' way of recreating the seven sovereigns, recreating a civilization based around the seven elements just like the old world, but instead being able to control these seven entities through the Gnosis. 7 powerful elemental entities corresponding to a particular foci connected to Celestia and the ability of their respective elements. I find it particularly strange that there even is such a thing as the Archon War. Consider this. Human civilization in Tivat has already existed before the Archon War and was already thriving at the very least. The Prayers artifacts had mentioned that humanity used to have a very close relationship with the gods until the end of each civilization came for them. But regardless, humanity was still very much in tune with the gods. So what I'm curious about is, what motivated the Archon War to begin with? What motivated Celestia to pit their gods against each other for dominion over the 7 nations? What I'm theorizing here is that the purpose of the Archons isn't inherently to adjudicate their nation, but to somehow harness the power of their people passively and become something akin to the 7 sovereigns. Maybe the Archon War was a test of which of Celestia's creations are worthy to be considered the right-hand men of the gods, and finally continue with their plan. It's also particularly strange that Venti says one of the reasons a god's powers grow is because of their rulership over the nation, which is why he deems himself as the weakest, which honestly sounds really parasitic. I want to give Venti the benefit of the doubt and say that he's just talking about political power, but at the same time, there's no reason for him to talk about that in the context of the scene. Whatever Celestia's plans were with the nations, or more specifically with the people, is quite disturbing to think about, because now we dive into the concept of the visions. I theorize that when a vision wielder ascends, their power is effectively assimilated into Celestia as a spiritual entity. Their innate ability to wield the vision, whether it was ambition or maybe just the spark of divinity inside of them, is innately removed and they are repurposed into stars. The reason I opened the topic of Gnosticism is because of the idea that the ambition of the people is what fuels the vision's power. The concept of Gnosticism hints that the divine spark within a person is innate to themselves, but they require the gnosis to truly unlock that divine spark's fullest potential. Therefore, the aspect of ascension being a way to compile and harness the power of allergens becomes all the more plausible. Zhongli and A's voice lines about the visions both hint that there is something more ominous about them, and that while they allow for elemental manipulation, there's a corresponding price. What that price is unknown. Though divine entities sapping energies from visions isn't exactly unheard of, the Traveler being a great example of this. But let's go a little further. These visions are the primitive versions of the Gnosis, and according to Venti, allergens, another term for vision wielders, can ascend to Celestia and attain godhood. But we've never seen this happen yet. Even more so is that A says that the key is people's desire, which is parallel with how the Inazuma Archon quest calls the vision as materialized versions of one's ambition. So going back to the concept of Gnosticism and mixing it with what we know from Genshin, the visions are already innate to a person once they unlock a deep desire and ambition. But just because you have ambition doesn't mean that you have the divine spark needed. This is why we have NPCs that have very astute goals, but they don't get a vision. It's possible that what Celestia is looking for is the divine spark. And to fully harness that divine spark, you must ascend to Celestia and attain the treasure of the gods. But just like the texts say, the gods goad you with their 7 treasures and the promise of divinity. What's even scarier is that when Aether asks Venti if entering Celestia makes you a god, Venti talks about sacrifice, how 3 gods sacrificed a part of themselves for the creation of the worlds. Venti's gaze is downcast as we see Vanessa entering. Pangu gave his blood to form the seas. The gods cut Purusha's body to create all living things, and the brains of Ymir became the clouds. According to Venti, their sacrifices seeded life into the cosmos. The idea of Celestia stealing the power of the dead is a really disturbing thought to me, and something that I've been entertaining for quite a while now. It's morbid, but in a way that is uncertain. But regardless, that's it for me today. What are your thoughts on Celestia's past and their relationship with the elements? Well, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me.